Welcome back to Gab with Gabby with me, Gabrielle. Coming up on the show today, we'll be talking about mindful perspectives, where I have interviewed several people regarding their mental health experiences, including some interesting insights into different perspectives of mental health. I also get to speak to 3 students who have all had a personal experience with mental health. Plus, we get to hear from staff members that work at Priestley College and offer support to students that are struggling with mental health and well-being. That's all coming up on today's podcast, Gab with Gabby. My first guest on today's show is Evan. Tell me what good mental health means to you.
Good mental health. I think good mental health is just kind of being at the same level as everybody else. Because when you do have like a mental health, like say if you have depression or anxiety, it kind of brings you down to a lower level compared to your peers or everyone else around you. So to me, good mental health is literally just being at the stable level. Like, you don't have to be super happy, you just have to be at the kind of functional level.
Tell me about the issues you've experienced with your mental health.
You know, I've had loads, mate. So, like, I think the issues I usually get, like, symptom-wise, I think I get, like, pretty full-on anxiety. So, like, say, because I'm on medication now, but say if someone were to, like, bump into me, or I was, like, walking down a corridor, my eyes would be watering, like, I'd be on the verge of tears just walking somewhere, because I'd be so, like, acutely aware of everything going on around me. But yeah, that's kind of the main issues I get.
Tell me about how having this difficulty makes you feel.
With the anxiety stuff, obviously, because you're so hyper, like, I think you're so hyper aware all the time that you kind of get so tired and bogged down, and you can kind of work yourself down like a, because you're thinking like non-stop. I think anxiety is like a gateway into depression, because you kind of go down this spiral of worse and worse thoughts that kind of get you in this really crappy place. So,
tell me about when you first knew you had the problem and how you tried to manage it.
So when I first knew I had the problem, I think I was very young, so we noticed it very early on. And we went through kind of like the regular kind of like child mental health system. So obviously I went through CAMS and we tried to do that, but usually a lot of the time those places don't really take you seriously until you're a lot older. So I feel like I suffered a lot unnecessarily, because basically those like CAMS and things, they just kind of wouldn't listen until I'd actually hit 18, and then they finally have to do something about it.
Tell me about when you decided to speak up to someone about your problem and what happened.
I didn't really speak up, people just kind of noticed. So I can't really answer that question, because it was just, I mean, a lot of the times when you have a problem, you don't really recognise that you have the problem, you just recognise symptoms. So you kind of have to vaguely describe what you're going through to people and hope that someone knows what's going on. So,
what help and support did you receive?
Obviously I had the CAMS, and then I think my doctors referred me to like this St John's place in Warrington, where I got like talking counselling. And then I'm trying to think of what else. Oh yeah, I used to have a lady in high school who basically I'd have a meeting with her like once every week. Bollocks, to be fair. I just think it's all a load. Like, people are just so, I don't know, like, the stigma of mental health. It is, you know what, it is strange, because I always thought, like, I'm the type of person who doesn't really give one about other people or what they think or whatever. Like, it's just like, sod off. But then there are times that I won't lie, like when I go to pick up my medication at the doctor's, and then like I'm in like a hoodie, and I just feel like that stereotypical like teenager, like, oh, I go through so much. And there are times when I do feel a bit like embarrassed, or the woman at the counter will give me like a weird voice, like, oh, you're here to pick up your medication, as if I'm some sort of like deviant or something for coming to get my bloody tablets. But yeah, obviously I don't really agree with the stigma stuff.
How do you manage your own mental health?
My own mental health, I think naturally you suffer so much where you get to the point where you're like, your level of kind of suffering is like, it's kind of like pain tolerance. So you go through so much where your level where something actually bothers you just gets a lot higher naturally. So like it takes a lot more to actually get you kind of to affect you in any way. And then obviously for me it's just trying to take the medication because it's like a massive game changer. But I think as long as obviously staying healthy is going to help no matter what. So, you know.
Are you aware of the 5 steps of mental health?
Absolutely not. I do not. I've never heard of them before.
Do you think education does enough to promote mental health support and guidance?
Yeah, I think it really does try. Obviously, sometimes they do a right shoddy job at it, like when they brought a meditation guru in at high school and got us to all pretend we were trees. But I think education is quite an open place for it, but you do get your weird, like your bad eggs and your strange people who aren't really that helpful. But yeah.
How does it affect us mentally and physically?
Mental health, it makes me dead like before I was on my medication I used to get dead physically tired all the time. Like I'd just come home and pass out because just a regular day that would be like just a normal every day to someone. For me it was like it took everything out of me just to like to just do the most minor things. So physically it was like a bloody pain.
Do you feel overwhelmed with your coursework?
I did feel a bit overwhelmed, and I think for some reason I've kind of got like a natural knack for coursework. Like I'm quite good at coursework as opposed to exams. So even though I was kind of a bit overwhelmed with it, I got it in the bud quite easy.
What would you say to someone who is experiencing mental health problems but is uncomfortable about speaking to someone about it?
Obviously, when you're 18 or when I think it might be when you're 16, I'm not sure, you can go and, get it checked out yourself, which is obviously, good if you don't want to talk to it about anyone. But I don't think there's any reason that you should be uncomfortable. I mean, it's just kind of whatever, like, you'd rather be treated for it than untreated and, people noticing that, if you get what I mean, I don't know. Like, you'd rather people notice, okay, I don't know what I'm trying to say, but...
How do you cope with stress and anxiety in your daily life?
I don't really have a good answer for this one because it is just medication and just, I suppose, getting used to it, I think, yeah.
How do you think mental health care can be made more accessible?
More accessible? Well, I think, obviously, there's, like, a massive problem where, like, you should listen to younger people when they are like in my case, if doctors and stuff would have listened to me when I was younger, I would have avoided loads of, like, agony. But then also there's the case of, like, you don't want to take younger people too seriously because what if they're, like, getting it wrong or something like that. So I think that's, like, that is quite, like, a difficult one to sort out. But I don't know, I'd say it just... The doctors themselves and the chemists themselves need to not have a stigma around it, because that does happen. Like the people at the chemists, like, they'll give me like a weird look or they'll say something like, ugh. But yeah, I think that's just kind of, yeah.
How do you think we can promote self-care and prioritise mental health in our daily lives?
It's kind of hard to, especially when you're in college. Oh my god, and if you had a job it would be way harder because you kind of don't really have the time to like pamper yourself or anything. And you have to get into a routine with it and like, because there have been moments in time where like I've just read loads of books and made myself a lovely tea and I've been so relaxed, but then that all falls apart within like 2 days. So it is really hard to do self-care and stuff, but I mean, just be lenient with yourself and like give yourself breaks. And yeah.
Do you think pets play a role in supporting mental health?
I know they do, because there are studies that show that like petting a dog releases chemicals. So yeah, I think pets do. That's a pretty simple one.
Do you know of any support groups to do with mental health?
Support groups, I'm not sure if CAMS is one. I know about tags, which I went there for 2 days, made no friends and then quit. But yeah, that's the only ones I can think of.
What has been the most helpful resource in managing your mental health?
God, I'm going to say it for the 50th time. Pills, medication, definitely.
Is there anything you wish people understood better about mental health?
There's a couple different things, I suppose. Like, I suppose to just, I mean, not really. I mean, obviously, like, you want people to be able to lay off you when you actually think, like, when you're really feeling it. Like, you kind of just want people to buzz off. But, and then you always get them people who kind of think you're kind of like milking it all the time or whatever. But I used to hate that, because like I used to hate it when people would treat me differently, because like I wish they'd just kind of let me figure it out myself and get myself to feel better, and then just kind of like, I don't know. Yeah, it's a hard one, that one.
What do you think could be done better for people with mental health issues?
Probably a lot, to be fair. But I think there are probably a lot of problems, but I'm just not very clued up on all the issues. Because obviously, since I've been on my medication, I've been like, I've not really been in that whole world. But there are definitely like CAMS for one is supposedly, and I've heard it from loads of different people, CAMS is like awful, and I know that for sure because they were quite bad with me as well. And you just always hear people complain about CAMS, but yeah, there are definitely things that need revising. Did COVID play a part in your mental health? COVID boosted my mental health so well, especially when you're anxious. You don't have to deal with anyone, you just get to sit in. But I think there was a point where I was just so bored that I was like, Jesus Christ, like I just want to escape.
Tell me what you think the biggest cause of mental health is.
For me, I think it's like just was something I was born with, which I think people seem to forget that's like a thing that can happen. Like, because I tried everything to make myself better before, and just nothing worked. And I think that's my lowest point was when I had tried everything and I'd done all these steps that they were telling me, and I'd done the counselling, and nothing was working, and I literally felt doomed. Because my dad had like really bad mental health problems as well. His were a lot more like severe than mine. Like I think he might have been schizophrenic or something. But yeah, like I think for me, it's definitely just something I was kind of born with. Because obviously, when I am on the tablets, I'm completely like I'm such like a sociable, like easygoing person. So.
Do you know what support is available to you outside of college?
There's always counselling and things, but I think I'm kind of at the stage where right now I'm like okay without it, and maybe in the future I'll pick it up, but yeah.
Do you know how to access mental health services?
Kind of, very vaguely. But I'd be reluctant to, if I can just kind of survive on my own, obviously I will. I totally will. But yeah, vaguely.
Thanks, Evan, for talking to me today. You have raised some valid points, and I look forward to interviewing you again in the future. Now, I'm going to chat with my next guest, Jane. Hi, Jane.
Hi, Gabby.
How are you today?
I'm very well, thank you.
It's lovely to have you on the show. Let's begin by talking about your role.
So my role here is college counsellor.
Tell me, what does mental health mean to you?
So mental health to me means it's in relation to a person's emotional and physical well-being and how they are able to manage on an everyday basis.
Tell me, what strategies are put in place in college to support students in college with mental health needs?
So in college we have a very robust wellbeing team, which includes myself as college counsellor. We have a wellbeing practitioner. We also have a full team of progress tutors and pastoral heads, and we are also supported by a study support team which includes an inclusion manager and learning support assistants.
Tell me about the support you offer to young people suffering from mental health problems.
So for me as college counsellor, I will see students for counselling therapy. That allows them to access support where they can come and talk in a safe and confidential space about any worries, any concerns, any problems that they may be experiencing.
Tell me about what training you have had to support young people with mental health problems.
So I qualified quite some time ago as a counsellor. I have a degree in counselling. I have a postgraduate degree in supervision. I've also done a number of other qualifications which are in relation to bereavement support and trauma. I've also done qualifications in supporting children and young people, and I've worked in FE for 25 years.
Tell me, how can you help a student that is struggling with their mental health?
So I would initially see that person for what we would call an initial assessment, and that encompasses a risk assessment. It also allows me to find out what issues that person may be struggling with and what goals they feel they want to focus on in counselling therapy. We would then agree a block of counselling sessions, which are normally up to 6 sessions of counselling, where I would then support that person over a number of weeks and months.
What is your perspective on the stigma surrounding mental health?
I think that it's very important for people to feel confident enough to talk to somebody if they are struggling with their mental health, rather than bottling up their feelings themselves and feeling that there's nobody else available to support them. It's really important that they feel confident to talk to somebody, because there's always somebody there that will be able to help and listen as well. That's really important.
Tell me, what impact you think social media has on young people's mental health?
I think that it can be very positive in that it raises awareness of a whole range of things that may impact on a person's mental health, and also raising awareness of things that we can do that will help our mental health in terms of lifestyle changes, the impact of social media on our mental health as well, so to reduce the stigma.
What advice would you give to young people to prioritise their mental health in their daily lives?
I think it's important to have a number of kind of what I would call self-help strategies in place, and that's really starting at the very basic level of looking at your diet, your sleep, making sure that you're getting some exercise and relaxation, that you are getting some natural sunlight, which is really good for promoting vitamin D and helping to promote better sleep, quality of sleep. So they are really the things that I would say are the basic fundamental things, but making sure that you are supported by a good network of friends and family, and knowing that they are there to talk to if you're struggling at any point.
How would a young person struggling with their mental health balance the demands of their courses and dealing with their struggles?
So that's really where, if using the example, if you were a student at Priestley, you would be supported by a whole team of specialist staff. So that would be your personal tutor. You would also have access to your pastoral head, and then you would be able to access the wellbeing team. So working with your pastoral head, your curriculum tutors as well, that are there on a day-to-day basis to offer support, guidance, advice, and then having the wellbeing team, we feel that we can support you with a holistic approach to your well-being and your mental health.
If you were a student again, what piece of advice would you tell your younger self?
If I were a student again, I would say to myself that try to do the best that you possibly can, and that is good enough, not to be too hard on yourself, and making sure that you prioritise your well-being alongside any studies that you are doing.
Tell me about how you can tell if someone is having difficulties with their mental health.
That can be often quite challenging to spot, because people will present with a whole range of symptoms. Some people may have changes in their behaviour. They may have changes in their health. Some people may feel they're able to talk about their struggles, whereas other people may become very reserved. They may be very quiet, and it's been noted by their tutors that something's not quite right, but they're just not sure what it is. And that can sometimes be quite challenging for us, because a lot of the time we rely on that person to tell us if they're struggling, particularly if they want to access wellbeing support. So that really is about having a close relationship with your tutors, in being able to feel you can approach them if you're struggling at any point, to make them aware that there's a problem, and also so that we can get the most appropriate support for that person.
Tell me, what impact do you think COVID had on young people's mental health?
I think that's a really good question, and it's difficult to answer in the time I think that we've got, but it did have quite a profound effect on people's mental health, in terms of people not being able to come to college and having that routine and seeing their friends, having those social support systems in place, seeing their tutors, and also, more importantly, having access to all the services that we provide here, including wellbeing support. We did see quite a an impact on when students were coming back to college in terms of returning to study, how difficult quite a lot of our students found that, because they were so used to being at home and studying online, and a lot of people were feeling very overwhelmed with coming back into a college environment again and being amongst people. Also, there was a lot of anxieties around COVID itself, and a lot of people were worried about coming into a big organisation and the impact it might have on their health as well.
Thanks, Jane. It was lovely to speak to you today. It was very insightful to hear your experiences as a college counsellor.
Thank you, Gabby. It was lovely to talk with you as well.
My next guest remains anonymous, and their answers are going to be read out by an actor. Tell me what good mental health means to you.
Good mental health means good self-esteem and confidence, and being able to live your life without, obviously feeling upset, but being able to manage it in appropriate ways and better ways.
Do you think education does enough to promote mental health support and guidance?
Yes and no, because for me, my learning support assistants help me by talking to me about my problems, but in some cases, schools don't really have enough experience and can sometimes handle situations in a worse way, which will mean a person who is suffering with mental health issues can suffer more.
Do you feel overwhelmed with your coursework?
Yes, because there's a lot of workload and homework that I need to do, and it can make me feel overwhelmed because I have a lot to juggle.
Do you think pets play a role in supporting mental health?
Yes, because they are therapeutic, and they can also be trained to be therapeutic in terms of like mental health, like emotions and physical health, so they would be beneficial for mental health.
Do you know of any support groups to do with mental health?
No, because support groups aren't really spoken about as much, and if there are support groups, they're not really for our age.
Do you know what support is available to you outside of college?
Not really, because there are a lot of support groups, and there's not really much support, especially between the ages of when a person may come to college when you're like 16 to 18, because it's a funny kind of age where you're either considered a child or an adult.
Do you know how to access mental health services?
Yes, because I have been educated about them, but mental health services can have a very long waiting list, so by the time someone may be off a wait.
Now I'm going to chat with my next guest, Tracy. Hi, Tracy.
Hello, Gabby. Nice to meet you.
How are you today?
I'm very well, apart from the rain. I wish the sun would come back.
It's lovely to have you on the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Tell me, what is your role at Priestley College?
My role at Priestley College is inclusion manager. So I look after all the students who have any SEND issues, particularly those students who've got education healthcare plans, to ensure that they've got the right support. I also oversee those students who have physical, mental health needs, any learning needs, to make sure that they've got a wellbeing plan in place or a student support profile, but also oversee other support and oversee a team of learning support assistants, as well as managing the Learning Resource Centre.
Tell me, what does mental health mean to you?
Mental health means looking after yourself, not physically, but mentally, in terms of ensuring that you are your mental health is good. So some people can have good mental health, others can have bad mental health, and it might vary depending on your situation. You could also, if you're stressed, if you're anxious about things, that can have an impact on your mental health. If you have, family circumstances which have affected you, that can also affect your mental health. But it's also about maintaining mental health, having good mental health by looking after yourself, eating well, talking about your issues, making sure that you exercise, that you have enough sleep, all of those things that you can do to ensure that you have good, positive mental health. So there's things that you can do, and then there's other times when you might struggle, when it's important to seek support for that from others.
Tell me, what strategies are put in place in college to support students in college with mental health needs?
I think one of the important things is to make sure that they've got somebody to go to, like a go-to person. We have students from all over, all different schools, 50 plus schools, and they're used to maybe seeing somebody within the school environment, whether it's a form tutor or friends there, or they might not even have anybody at school, but they have come to college, and it can be very overwhelming for students at first. So it's important that they know from day one and before they arrive, say through transition days, that they're able to find out who they're able to go to for support. So whether it's Caroline Atkinson, the wellbeing practitioner, or Jane Dixon, the college counsellor, or the progress tutor, or a pastoral head, or myself as the inclusion manager. But we've also got a learning support team as well that can support young people. And it's those go-to people, and also being comfortable with talking about their issues in a safe environment, so that they're not judged and there's not that stigma, because a lot of students who come to Priestley may not share that they've got struggles with their mental health because they feel that there's a stigma, but it's important for us to pass on the message that it's really important that they do share any issues or concerns they've got, because initially they might be absolutely fine, but there might be things that happen in their life that leads to them affecting their mental health. So it's important that they know who to go to.
Tell me about the support you offer to young people suffering from mental health problems.
So I've mentioned this before, but there are support could be around stress with exams. It could be things that trigger them, whether it's coursework deadlines or friendship groups and things. So it's making sure that they've got an opportunity to talk to people about it, and whether it's support with work if they're feeling overwhelmed. When we've got graduate teaching assistants, we've got learning support assistants, but we've also got for specific help, we've got Jane Dixon, and we've also got Caroline. In addition to that, it's also ensuring that we can refer students for external support if it's something specific that they need, whether it's like struggling with eating disorders or with their mental health, or encouraging them to go to the GP. There's also those students who might need to be referred for like an autism diagnosis or an ADHD diagnosis, so we'll support students with that as well.
Tell me about what training you have had to support young people with mental health problems.
I've had a lot of training over the years. I used to be a counsellor for a number of years, although I don't practice that anymore, but I think that really helps. But also in terms of training through my job, external courses and things just to help people. In addition, we've got the mental health first aid training, which I've done a few times, which looks at overall the different mental health problems, and we're trying to encourage as many staff as possible to have the mental health first aid training as well as students.
Tell me, what advice can you offer to young people that are struggling with their mental health?
One of the best advice I could give students, and this is a cliche, is a problem shared is a problem halved. Many young people and also older people struggle because they don't talk about their issues and they keep it in. And that means that they might become irrational in terms of thoughts, they might make the problem bigger than it really is. And once they've talked about it and offloaded, then that makes the problem a lot less and not as bad as they think, because you'll always get some support with it. In particular, that is an issue with young men and older men, unfortunately. So it is about talking about it, not being ashamed about it, not having the stigma around it, by talking about it, they're able to get the right support, because it's sad to think that some people really struggle with their mental health and not have the opportunity to talk to people, whether it's within college or through like external agencies or family members, because I'm sure a lot of family members would rather you talked about it rather than suffering in silence.
Tell me how you can help a student that is struggling with their mental health.
So what we do, as part of my job, we identify students, so when they come in for their interview, they can disclose anything that they're suffering with. So it could be in terms of a learning need, it could be like physical or mental health. So a lot of students will share with us the mental health issues that they might struggle with at school, whether it's anxiety or low moods or depression, and then we can send them like a wellbeing plan, and it helps us to support them as soon as they start college. So it's really important that tutors are aware of, to an extent, that a student is struggling with anxiety or they're struggling with mental health generally, and how they can support them from day one. But it's also making sure that they know where to go to if they do need it, because they might be absolutely fine at the beginning of the year, but then there might be things that impact on the mental health during the year. So it's making sure they know that they've got people they can talk to.
Tell me, how can you help a student that is struggling with their mental health?
I've answered
that one, haven't we? I was thinking that. What is your perspective on the stigma surrounding mental health?
I think there is a bit of a stigma. I think it's getting much better because of things like social media, and also there are a lot of like famous people who are in the news and things that have been sharing their struggles with mental health, which helps others think that I'm not on my own, and it's fine to do that and it's fine to seek help. But there are still some people who do not want to share it because they feel that there is a stigma and they'll be judged. But it's important to feel safe in the environment, that you're not going to be judged by anyone, and that people will be happy to help in general. So it's trying to reduce that stigma. But the more people know about other people with mental health issues, the easier it is for those people to feel that they're not alone.
Tell me what impact you think social media has on young people's mental health.
So in terms of social media, I think there's lots of positives in relation to, you know, those people who share their struggles with mental health online, and also there's lots of advice that's given. But you've also got to question some people's, you know, in terms of the advice, is it the right advice? But also that social media can have an impact on people's mental health, because some people do not have a filter. They write these atrocious comments on other people's, you know, social media platforms, and because they're not, you know, things that they probably wouldn't say to them if they were face to face. But some people just find it easy and not think about the impact on others when they make these comments, horrible comments about other people. And that is like a real issue with social media. And I know that they're looking at maybe reducing increasing the age for where young children can have access to social media, because some young people have got access to, say, like Facebook and things from like the age of 6, when they shouldn't, because you basically can lie about your age. So I think it's important that there's a balance, and that the age for when young people can access social media should be a lot older, so that you've got more, you're aware of the responsibility around it, and you know, you've not had that negative impact of social media from an early age. But yeah, I think it can have a positive and a negative impact on young person's mental health.
What advice would you give to young people to prioritise their mental health in their daily lives?
I think it's important to look after your physical health. So in terms of making sure that you do exercise, you eat well, you sleep well, but also that you talk things through and have chats with people. Even if you think it's something minor, before it gets any bigger, it's just to offload how you're feeling that day. And it's really healthy to do that. So promoting, you know, talking to others, and also about healthy living, can really have a positive impact on your mental health, on your daily life.
How would a young person struggling with their mental health balance the demands of their courses and dealing with their struggles?
This is really difficult because when your mental health is bad, your motivation might not be there, and you might be really feel negative about things and think, what's the point in carrying on? So you haven't got that energy to cope with the demands of your courses. But people will go through struggles throughout their lives and throughout the time at college, and it's important that they talk about it, that they meet with a progress tutor, for example, or someone from the learning support team, or a graduate teaching assistant, say, look, I'm struggling with this, and it's about small steps. That if you've got too much work on at once, it's like thinking, well, let's just do it baby steps, a bit at a time, to tick those boxes. But you also need to have people with you to support you through that and encourage you to get through the work. And once you tick those boxes and get things done, your mental health will be greatly improved because you're actually achieving something, you're doing something. So it's when you're feeling overwhelmed, it's to talk about it and get the help you need, because people do not live on an island for nothing, because there are other people around to support you.
If you were a student again, what piece of advice would you tell your younger self?
I like that one. To do the opposite to the advice I'm giving you. So, and not to do the opposite. So sometimes, you might leave things to the last minute, you might party too hard, you might get a lack of sleep, and that causes some stress you cause yourself, because you don't help yourself if you're not looking after your mental health, and also you're not making sure that you sleep, you party too hard. I know as a student, when I was at university, there's times when I left things to the last minute, and then that causes stress, and then you work at 24/7 to get your work in. Please don't do that, Gabby, if you ever go to university. But you know that when you're organised and you get that help and support from your tutors or your friends, then it's a lot better. So it's just doing things little and often, I would say, rather than doing things like Eurovision, lastminute.com, or just for hours on end without a break. Just do a little bit at a time. You're more likely to take it in, and you're more likely to enjoy your work because you're doing it a bit at a time rather than just doing everything all at once where you feel overwhelmed. That's my top tip. You're welcome.
Tell me about how you can tell if someone is having difficulties with their mental health.
Sometimes you can't tell. Sometimes people cover it up really well. So even those people who are depressed, they can cover it up that well that they look happy all the time, when in fact underneath they're hiding their struggles. You can tell sometimes if someone is usually chipper and happy and then they've gone really quiet and withdrawn, then that can be a sign. Obviously if people are tearful, or they are missing lessons, or they're avoiding things, or they're not going out as much, they're spending more time in the bedroom, things like changes in patterns, changes in habits, can have an indication that they are struggling with the mental health. If I was thinking about a student, it could be about attendance, it could be missing deadlines, it could be being quiet. But then you've got others, and particularly men, who do struggle but hide it very well, but struggle on their own, and that's really sad. So it's just to make sure that these people are picked up, and it's just encouraging people to maybe have a one-to-one chat just to see how people are, because a lot of people will say they're fine when they're not. What does fine mean? And it's basically, having the opportunity to sit with somebody, have a coffee with them or a drink, or, just a bit of a chat with them so they can open up a bit more, maybe in a better location rather than in front of a load of people. So that's when they're more likely to open up. So sometimes you can see people are really struggling, and others you can't. Some people hide it really well.
Tell me, what impact do you think COVID had on young people's mental health?
I think at the time I remember people saying that COVID would have a big impact in a few years. It'll go on for a good few years in terms of the impact of COVID. And at the time I thought, no, it'll be all right, it'll be fine. But more and more it goes on. In terms of the last 4 years, I can see it in terms of people's struggles, but also the fact that people are less likely to go out as much. And sometimes that might be a good thing, and maybe you've seen that family are more important. But I think some young people do struggle with anxiety, things like social anxiety, mixing with people, because they were so used to being at home. And also from when people were babies, like when they didn't go to nursery, all that social interaction that they lost. So even the ones that are coming through from young, like babies to nursery to primary, I know like friends of mine who were teachers in the primary sector and nursery sector can see how the learning has been delayed with those babies and young children, but also the fact that they have not interacted as much, not developed as much, so they're playing catch up all the time, and that'll probably be the same for a number of years. But I can see in terms of the number of referrals for to the mental health services, the waiting lists, that's obviously having an impact on young people, for seeking help, and also the number of referrals that have been for autism and ADHD have gone up greatly over the last year or so. So the impact on services has also been massive.
Thanks, Tracy, for talking to me today. You have raised some valid points, and I look forward to interviewing you again in the future.
Thank you, Gabby. Really enjoyed it, and good luck.
Thank you. Now I'm going to chat with my next guest, Tilly. Hi, Tilly. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Gab. Thank you.
How are you today, Till?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Amazing.
Good.
Now let's get chatting.
Let's get chatting.
How does it affect us mentally and physically?
Talking from experience, it's very draining. Like, I'm in college 5 days a week. Sometimes I'm in later, like 12 o'clock onwards, but still if you have different subjects, you're struggling with your mental health, and you're doing coursework or you're revising for exams. It's so much to do and you put so much pressure on you, and then you're balancing your mental health, and it's like, oh my god, I'm never going to get this done, my teacher's going to kill me. But I think definitely when you're struggling with your mental health, it is so exhausting, because some people might suffer in silence because they don't want other people to know, and other people might be brave enough to speak out about it, but still teachers might not grasp what you're actually going through, and they just put more pressure on you. So I think it's definitely very, very draining. Like, it literally takes the life out of you. It's like, I always use this analogy, you've got a Hoover and it sucks the life out of you. Like, your entire energy and just like brain has been sucked out by a Dyson Hoover and it's been shoved back in, and you just don't know what to do with yourself. You just feel so isolated, so withdrawn, quiet, and not many people can understand it really unless they've been through it themselves.
Do you feel overwhelmed with your coursework?
Oh god, yes. I mean, I'm very good at managing my time, I'll give you that. Like, I'm not a party person, I don't go to party 24/7. I go out with my friends and stuff, we hang out quite a bit and stuff outside of college. But because I'm doing health and social care and childcare, it's only 2 subjects, but there's so much to do. And I've had a supply teacher for quite a while, which is no fault of my teacher, he's not been very well, but that's just made it 10 times worse, because supplies are brought in to an agency to cover lessons, but sometimes the supply teachers won't know what the subject is. They might not have any knowledge on it, or even if they do, they might not understand what work you're doing, which just means that you're not really being taught. And I would say having a face-to-face teacher is a lot better than working from home, because it means you have teacher input, you can ask some questions to get assignments signed off, and if you don't have your own teacher, it's really difficult to do that. And even though 2 subjects might not seem like a lot, you might have the pass criteria through, and then you've got the merits, and then teachers say, right, I need this distinction done by Friday. You're like, oh, don't be having for this the merits yet. I have a life. And I think that's what teachers forget. I mean that in the nicest way possible. And I know they've got to mark stuff as well, but it's not very therapeutic, and it stresses a lot of people out, and I know it's not just me.
What would you say to someone who's experiencing mental health problems but is uncomfortable about speaking to someone about it?
Don't be afraid. Speaking up was the best thing I did with my LSAs, with Amanda, with Tracy Ryan. Spoke to Caroline, the wellbeing practitioner. I spoke to my mum about it. The best thing you could do. I think keeping it inside was literally eating me alive. It was like I was getting worse every day. Like I had PTSD from a previous trauma that I'd been through, and I just felt, I was just putting it on and just being a teenager, and then it was slowly, I was sleeping like 18 hours a day. Didn't want to tell anyone because I didn't want to burden them with my problems. Like staff, they've got their own kids to worry about, they've got other students to worry about. I was thinking, well, they don't need my problems. Then when I spoke to Amanda about it, she was like so supportive, and you know, she made sure that I got access to the right help that I needed. I think sometimes you're worried about telling your class teachers because you'll just fall through the cracks, and I think honestly that's what happened a few times with my teachers when grasping the importance of like how bad my anxiety was, because I think they just thought, oh, she's a bit anxious, I shouldn't really want to do her work, but social anxiety and actual crippling anxiety when you just can't go into class, you feel like you want to cry and you just feel like sick all the time. Bit too much information, but I know, like, it's a proper thing. I think sometimes my teachers forgot, and it wasn't just me taking the pay, it was like it was proper. And I was grateful for my LSAs and for Amanda and for my mum and for Tracy for making sure that they could guide me in the right direction and get me access to the services that I need in order to get to where I am now.
Thanks, Tilly, for coming on the show. It was lovely chatting to you today.
Lovely chatting to you too, Gabs.
I loved it. My next guest is Jo. Hi, Jo.
Hi, are you alright, Gabby?
Yeah, I'm doing okay. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you.
Tell me, what is your role at Priestley College?
My role is as a progress tutor. I have to develop the social skills and help people become more employable during the time at college, so that when they leave Priestley College they can go on and get a job or go on to university. So it's to help develop those skills and support them while they're in college. So that could be in a mental health capacity, or it can be just to give them the extra support they need to help them get through the courses.
Tell me, what does your mental health mean? What does mental health mean to you?
Everybody has mental health. So at times it's good, other times it can be a bit wobbly. So good mental health is when you're feeling life's exciting and you can just keep moving forward. Mental health can be bad, where things get in the way of life, so you can't carry on with your normal way of life, and you might need some interventions to help you be able to carry on with that.
Tell me about the support you offer. No. Tell me what strategies are put in place in college to support students in college with mental health needs.
Okay. So we have a full wellbeing team, so that includes a counsellor, college counsellor, a wellbeing officer, who would be one that would sort of signpost people to different support networks, letting them know about online facilities, and just helping develop techniques, coping strategies in order for somebody to continue and keep moving forward with their life. They sometimes also signpost when they need referring to the college counsellor. Every student is allocated a progress tutor who they see in a session once a week, but they also have one-to-ones at least 3 times a year to check on them, make sure that they're able to cope with what's happening and what they've got to go through, get through in the studies, and put in support. So we also support that strategy of giving them techniques and showing them where they can get support as well. But in some cases we have to pass them on to the wellbeing officer or the counsellor.
Tell me about the support you offer to young people suffering from mental health problems.
Okay, so similar to what I've just said, the support we offer is, first of all, we would have a sit down and a chat and find out what it is that's, the problem, what they're struggling with. In some cases that can be their college work, so they're struggling to balance that, so we might suggest they go and see a graduate teaching assistant to get some help with balancing the work out, organising the work more effectively. But if it's more of a mental health concern that they are worried about coping, we would refer them. We first of all would try and help them ourselves as a progress tutor. If we didn't feel we had the tools to do that, we would refer them on to the wellbeing practitioner or the counsellor.
Tell me about what training you have had to support young people with mental health problems.
Okay, all the progress tutors have had mental health first aid training, so they've all done that qualification. So that shows us all the different types of mental health conditions so that we can try and support each one, and it also gives us information on what sort of organisations that are out there that we can get them involved with to help them, to overcome any problems that's stopping them carrying on with life and doing their studies. What else? I also do lots of training online through like webinars and things like that from CAMS or from Cooth. Recently done one with Cooth. I also, which was in my own time, did a counselling qualification, and I hope to eventually increase that and get a higher counselling qualification.
Tell me what advice that you can offer to young people that are struggling with their mental health.
Breathe. Breathe. Get your breathing right first, always, so that you're calm. Get out and get some fresh air, do some exercise, speak to somebody. Always speak to somebody and let them know how you're feeling, so that they can try and support you. It's always best to vocalise how you're feeling, and ask for help all the time. That's the main thing. But breathing, exercise, eating healthy, just sort of having a healthy sort of lifestyle.
Tell me, how can you help a student that is struggling with their mental health?
So if a student came to me and they were struggling with their mental health, first of all I'd try and find out what it was. Not all students will tell you, because obviously they feel it's not our business as such. So I would focus on how it was making them feel, how it was impacting them. And once I knew those sort of things, I'd know where to refer them on to. But would always be encouraging regular check-ins so that they come and have a chat. Even if they want to offload but not share, they can still come and have a chat to try and help them through that. Sometimes we recommend things like twiddle rings if it's just general anxiety, so we can sort of tell them where they can find those sort of things. Using the online sites, if they don't want to speak to somebody face to face, they can do it through Cooth, like online counselling's available there through that.
What is your perspective on the stigma surrounding mental health?
I don't think the stigma is as bad as it used to be. I think stigmas tend to be the person themselves stigmatising themselves and thinking that they're weak because they've got mental health concerns, whereas I believe everybody has that to a point, and it just depends on what part of their life it hits them. Some people are younger when it happens, and then they become very good at the techniques, so they don't have problems later in life. Others don't have any problems in early life, and then later on they have problems then. So I think it's just should be something that people shouldn't be embarrassed or stigmatise at all, because we all have it at some point.
Tell me what impact you think social media has on young people's mental health.
I think it's very bad for them. I think social media, although it has its positive aspects, I think it's puts a lot of pressure on young people to fit in. I think it blocks sociability. I think people now don't know how to socialise with each other because they rely on not just social media but other phones to communicate. So they spend less time meeting up, spending time together. So I do think social media is a very negative thing overall.
What advice would you give to young people to prioritise their mental health in their daily lives?
To prioritise, just balancing their lives, so allowing time for rest, allowing time for fun and for work. So it's basically getting a nice little schedule together and always prioritising fun and rest, but fitting everything else in, as well. So you can't neglect the work. You need to get a balanced approach and also listen to your own body. And if you're starting to feel unwell, then that might mean that you need to have more of a break, but you need to get some advice to help you with that.
How would a young person struggling with their mental health balance the demands of their courses and dealing with their struggles?
Through timetables. So basically I always encourage my students to print a timetable off, add on a Saturday, Sunday, and work out how they can slot the right amount of hours in for the studies. So we encourage 4 hours for each subject. We would say, so that's most students will have 12 hours a week extra work to do outside of the lessons. So we would encourage them to timetable that in. So over the weekend, so they are also timetabling in when they've got events on or sports or hobbies, so that they can see where the gaps are and then slot those subjects into those bits for their study. Try and do as much in the college time where they've got free periods, and ensure they have breaks, regular breaks as well. So even if it's just go for a walk, but do something substantial in that break, not just sit there staring at the phone. Maybe talk to somebody or go and have a good walk or something like that to make them feel like they've had a break rather than been straining their eyes on the phone or things like that.
If you were a student again, what pieces of advice would you tell your younger self?
I was an over reviser. I revised ridiculously and ended up very, very stressed. So my advice would be to get a good plan together. Don't focus completely on the studying, to make sure the fun time's in there, which is what I missed out. I let myself sleep, I let myself eat, and I let myself work, but I didn't have any fun time. So that affected my mental health and made me get very, very stressed just before my exams. So I would tell myself to have more fun and factor that into my schedule.
Tell me about how you can tell if someone is having difficulties with their mental health.
It can be visual. It can be that you can see that they look distressed, so they might be crying, or they might just look really sad, or very like they're not engaging. The eye contact's gone. They're not looking at people like they should. But generally it's through attendance. So if somebody's missing a lot of lessons, or if someone's attending a lesson, missing a lesson, attending a lesson, sort of missing the odd one, tends to indicate something's wrong, whether it be their mental health or whether there's something else going on that could be impacting the mental health. So it's behaviours that they do. So if they're 100% attendance but they've got the head on the desk trying to have a sleep, I would think there was something going on at home. But if they had 50% attendance but was upright and bright and perky during a lesson, I'd still have concerns, because do you know what I mean? They're not attending all the time, but they're not right. Do you see what I mean? So if they're sleepy in the lessons, that's a problem. If they're not attending, that's a problem. So it can be lots of different things. Yeah, and sometimes students tell you. So usually you can spot it through those sort of behaviours, but there have been students that have surprised me.
Tell me what impact do you think COVID had on young people's mental health?
Quite a lot. Like social media, COVID stopped people socialising. Therefore, people lost the interaction with other people, so they find making new changes, new relationships quite difficult. So the move up to college, it's not just the increase in work that affects them, it's the change in venue, it's not familiar in the environment, they've got to make new friends, and because they've relied on the same school friends throughout school, they've got used to that, and change on itself can have a massive impact. Since COVID, I've probably dealt with more students that couldn't even get themselves here, where we've actually, they've not ended up coming, they've lasted a week or so and then left because their social skills have been so affected by isolation. So I would say it's certainly impacted on mental health. Yeah, made people less resilient, they don't cope as well, and it's also made them not feel that they can be in rooms with more people.
Thanks for chatting to me today, Jo. It's been lovely to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me.
I've loved it. My final guest on my podcast today is Mark Edgington. Hi, Mark.
Hi, Gabby. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Absolutely fine, and thank you so much for inviting me onto your show today.
Tell me, what is your role at Priestley College?
So I am a pastoral head, that's like a head of year in a school, and I'm also the deputy designated safeguard lead.
Tell me, what does mental health mean to you?
Mental health to me is how we are emotionally, how we feel, and really being in a position that to be positive about who we are and what we stand for. That's what I think mental health is.
Tell me, what strategies are put in place in college to support students with mental health needs?
So obviously statistics show that people in general, not just students, are increasingly struggling with their mental health, and we as a college want to be able to, I suppose, be proactive rather than reactive to something. So at college we have a wellbeing referral system, which is basically in essence a form that currently students can refer in if they're struggling. Parents can refer in on behalf of their children, and teachers can also refer. And that wellbeing referral form is then triaged by the wellbeing team, of which I'm part of, every week, and then we allocate who we think is the best person to work with that young person, whether that be counselling or wellbeing support or external agencies. So that's what we have in relation to the wellbeing referral form. But then equally on top of that, we made a pledge that we were going to increase the amount of staff who have mental health first aid training. So all of our progress tutors, for example, are mental health first aid trained, which means that they can help support students and be confident, which is really important, that they are supporting them in the most appropriate way to meet the needs of that individual.
Tell me about the support you offer to young people suffering from mental health problems.
So I think really that's the same almost as the last question really, is that we have lots of different I suppose entry points for students to be able to access ultimately our counsellor or our wellbeing practitioner. But then equally we have those progress tutors who will work and do one-to-ones with those students to try and support them. And if we can't, then it's about also involving external agencies, whether that be GPs or CAMS, sometimes social services, or just other external agencies like Cooth or Papyrus or Talking Minds. There's so many different ones that actually students can get help with. So we kind of act as a vehicle to for students to understand just what's out there that can help them, hopefully.
Tell me about what training you've had to support young people with mental health problems.
So because I oversee wellbeing and I oversee safeguarding on my two big roles, across college roles, I have regular safeguarding training, which all safeguarding team have to undertake, and we need to keep that topped up. So I have the safeguarding training. I then undertake regular webinars and conferences throughout the year, whether that be on things like child exploitation or radicalisation. I also attend things on domestic violence and how to deal with students who might be, in some sense, being abused physically, sexually, or neglect, etc. So I go on lots of training. I'm also a mental health first aider, so I've got that behind me. So therefore, like the progress tutors, all the pastoral heads are mental health first aid trained, so that we can triage and help support students. And then I'm also, on top of that, I've also done my senior mental health lead certificate for secondary schools and academies, so that I can oversee the wellbeing team here at Priestley.
Tell me about what advice you can offer to young people that are struggling with their mental health.
Well, I actually go one step further, really, Gabby. I don't think it's about advice that I would give a student and a young person at Priestley College would be the same advice that I'd give my best mate or an adult also struggling with mental health. I don't think the two things are very different. I think the advice is the same. And I think that we have to acknowledge that everyone will have good days and bad days. Everyone has those. But what we do about those good days and bad days is so important. And so therefore we have to, the first way of really dealing with mental health is to acknowledge that you're not in a good place, that you are struggling in some way. And then the second phase really is that person needs to reach out to a person or to a organisation. But in my experience, the biggest thing, I think, is talking about how you feel. Because when we don't talk, we bottle it up. And when we bottle it up, we feel worse. So if there was a handy tip to anyone, it would be talking or expressing how we feel.
Tell me, how can you help a student that is struggling with their mental health?
Well, I think the mental health is such a massive umbrella, isn't it, that it could be anything. It could be anything, and it could be, on one scale, it could be that they've fallen out with a friend and it's affected them, all the way through to a bereavement of a loved one and anything in between. And there's so many different things that make up little pieces of the jigsaw puzzle. All these little things, but actually the jigsaw puzzle itself is mental health, if that makes sense. So there isn't one thing really, but I think ultimately it's about supporting them to realise that actually there are better days ahead, and that sounds really cheesy, doesn't it? But realising that ultimately, you can get the right support to help you get in a better place.
What is your perspective on the stigma surrounding mental health?
Well, I think it's twofold. I think it's really interesting about stigma and mental health. I think generationally, I'm only slightly older than you, Gabby. I'm only literally a couple of years older than you, I think. But I know that the older you get, the more likelihood is that you might not appreciate what mental health actually is. So I'll give you an example. My dad is considerably older than me because he's my dad. But I know that generation rarely talked about things, that they just cracked on, just get on with it. Almost like saying, stop your moaning. So I think there's a stigma is attached to it, is that there's a lack of understanding from some areas of society. I think that there's a stigma attached that if I broke my leg physically, I would go to the hospital. I'd get treated for that broken leg, wouldn't I? And I'd have a cast put on, wouldn't I?
You'd have a cast put on.
But I'd know, wouldn't I, that within 6 to 8 weeks the cast is coming off and I'll be able to walk again.
Yeah.
And I think that it's not a stigma, it's a lack of understanding that mental health can be with us all our lives.
It's not going to disappear.
Correct. And so therefore, how we need to educate people better on what mental health is. Saying that, however, I also believe that sometimes it's too easy to say, I've got a mental health problem. Because actually, as I alluded to before, we can all have good days and bad days. That doesn't mean I've got bad mental health. That's just life, isn't it? And so therefore, I think everyone needs to understand what is mental health, and to use it appropriately, so that when we say we've got an issue, I'm struggling with, that people will listen to it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Tell me what impact you think social media has on young people's mental health.
Well, it's quite interesting because obviously I was of an age where I didn't have a phone as a kid. It just didn't exist. And I came to Priestley College as a student. So when I was your age, I was here as a student, never had a phone. And I think social media can be such a positive experience, but that it equally can be a very negative experience. I think that there is a lot of pressure for young people to conform in society to certain things, to wear the right things, to behave in a certain way. I also think that it can be too easy to attach yourself to saying, well, they're like that, so I need to be like this. For example, if someone self-harms, there is research to show that within that friendship groups, other people will also self-harm. Now, that's not because it's struggling or anything. There's something called like the domino effect of people perceive that to be okay to do. Does that make sense? And so therefore, I think social media can fuel things in a negative way. And I think there's a lot of pressure on young people these days. And bullying is a really good example. So we have students here who, like any school or college where they are bullied, and I always use the example when I talk to staff that I'm very open about the fact that I was bullied as a student when I was at school. But at least when I was bullied, I knew that it was only going to happen between 9 a.m. and 3 p.m. And then I got on my bus, but as soon as I got off my bus and I went home, at least I wasn't being bullied at home, was I?
No.
So what happens with social media when I've got a phone in my hand now? Do you think that bullying stops at 3 o'clock or not?
No.
What do you think happens?
Carries on, because then they get on Snapchat and they start sending messages to each other, and then it's group chats, and then other people get added.
So it's 24/7, isn't it?
It's all the time.
So that is a really good example of how social media is used in a negative way as a platform to just pour fuel on the fire. There's no respite from it anymore, is there?
No, there's no break.
And as human beings, we're all addicted to our phones as well, aren't we?
We're all addicted.
So you're absolutely right. I think bullying is a good example of how these things happen all the time, and there is no switch off. And I think therefore that does have a negative impact on how you feel and your mental health.
What advice would you give to young people to prioritise their mental health in their daily lives?
So I'm a great believer in you need to step away from things, don't consume yourself with things, you know what I mean? You can get drawn into friendship group issues and all those kind of stuff because, you just get drawn in. And I think take a step back. So my advice is, I know it sounds really bad, but I've got 2 little dogs and I make sure that if I'm annoyed in the working day, because someone's annoyed me in the day, some teacher or somebody I work with is, what's going on there? I'll just take my dogs for a walk. I'll escape, I'll do stuff. I think hobbies, it sounds really kind of like, really? But I think hobbies and having something to do is so important. I think the more that we get out, we socialise, we see our mates, or I like reading, I like doing art, I like walking my dog, I like going for a run. So my advice is to just basically not sit in your room. Because if you think sitting in your room, you're overthinking, and you're going to spiral. So my kind of suggestion, because I use it myself, is get out, go and do stuff, go and live your life.
I agree with that, Mark, because
so what would you do?
when I'm in a bad mood or I get in from college and I think, God, that teacher's got on my nerves today.
Yeah.
I need to get out. I need to do something. The first thing I do when I get in from college, even in the morning and in the afternoon, even if I'm not in a bad mood, I've got to go on the swing across the road. The neighbours put them in lockdown.
There you go.
Because it relaxes my senses and calms me down.
And what's important is that might work for you. We say that to someone else listening to this podcast today, and they'll go, I'm not got sitting on the swing. And we're not saying that everyone needs to go on a swing, are we, Gab?
No.
What we're saying is it's so important you get out.
We got
You
outside.
go out and do stuff. And, particularly it's lighter now, and I think in the summer months, use that time. And then promise yourself that by the time you get back off that swing and you go home, you've left all the troubles of your day on the swing.
On the swing.
Do you get what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, I talk to my dogs all the time, and they just think I'm weird. But I just get it off my chest. I take my dogs for walks.
But dogs play a massive role in it, I think.
I think animals do, because they're proven that if you by stroking your cat or your dog, it brings it calms you down, doesn't it?
Calms you down.
So yeah.
What would a young person struggling with their mental health? What would a person struggling with their mental health balance the demands of their courses and dealing with their struggles?
So I think this is really attached to what we were just saying. I think it's important that you go out, you do stuff, you go on the swing, you do all those things. But I think structure, when you're talking about balance equals structure. I think everyone should have structure. When people don't have structure in their lives, that's when the wheels can come off the car, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So for me, it's making sure that right now students are going through their exams. So what's the revision you're doing? Little and often.
Little and often.
But equally, saying out of every hour I'll do 45 minutes, and then I'll do 15 minutes where I'm going to make a brew and get up and walk away. And I'm still going to build into that structure of seeing my mates, going on Snapchat. All of those things are important, but it's having clear, defined times when you can do stuff.
Yeah. And having equal balances.
Absolutely, yeah, because ultimately you don't want to cram all in, do you, for revision? You should do it obviously as you're going along. But then equally, you should make sure that you are getting enough sleep. I love my sleep. But getting enough sleep, eating well, drinking enough water, and all those kind of things that we tend to just forget. But we need to that's why we need the structure. We
need the structure to carry forward, don't we?
To make us it's clearer for us, and it will make us better in the long term, because, we do the work, we know what coursework we've got to do. I'm a visual learner, Gabby, right? So I need everything on a wall. If I had a room at home or something, I'd have it on the wall with my deadlines when they need to do. Because I need to make sure I know what I'm doing and when I'm doing it.
That's like me.
Yeah.
I have to have structure to my life. When I leave college, because I know that's on its way from happening, it's on its way. I think to myself, well, how am I going to cope when I'm not in college? Because it's a routine. I won't have a 6 o'clock alarm going off. I won't have 5 o'clock getting in from college.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. And the structure will just disappear.
And structure, yeah, and the structure is important, but everyone's structure should be different. I can sit here now talking to you on this podcast, and we can talk about what is structure, but actually the reality is it's different for everyone, isn't it? So I know that when I've got a lot of work to do, I'm more likely to do that in the morning.
Yeah.
So I'm more likely to get up early to complete something than say I'm staying up till 2 a.m. to do it. Do you see my point? I'd rather go to bed early get the sleep and get up, and I have been known to get up and be up at 5, 4:30, get the work done what I need to do. But that's just me. The person sat next to me or you might go, well, actually I prefer working of an evening. It doesn't matter what we do as long as we do it. And that's why we need the structure.
And that's why we need the structure. If you were a student again, what piece of advice would you tell your younger self?
To stop messing around and actually realise that these grades that I'm going to get are going to last with me forever and ever. I think that's the biggest thing. I think we can live in the moment. I definitely did. And I spent a lot of time being with my mates, and I just wish that I'd probably worked a little bit harder.
Tell me about how you can tell if someone is having difficulties with their mental health.
How I can see if someone's having difficulties?
Yeah.
I think it's in many different ways. If you're talking about a student, then it would be things like you might find that their attendance is dropping off, You might see a student who's not engaging in class. But I think ultimately, a lot of it comes down to body language. I think you can read a lot from how someone is, how they react, how they act with another person. You can just sense that they're just a bit off. And some people do it in different ways. I've known some people to, for example, they just look tired. They look agitated. They can't focus on tasks. Really silly, but it might be that they're always wearing the same clothes because they just can't be bothered. Or they can't be bothered washing their hair. And it's all those things, because all those little pieces just start to fall away about who that person is. And that's normally because actually, what's wrong?
Something's going on. But
Correct,
it's hidden.
and that's why it's so important. When I said about talking, I mean, everyone will say, I know a lot of people who will pass me in the corner and go, "Hi, you okay?" And most people will say, "Yeah, I'm fine." But not everyone's fine.
We'll say they're fine because it's the easiest thing
And
to
a
do.
doctor, a surgeon once told me, a few years ago now, Gabby, they said to me, if someone's prepared to ask you the question, i.e., how are you, they should be prepared to listen to the answer, even if it's not what they want to hear. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah.
So sometimes when you say, "Hi Gabby, okay," if you say fine when you're not, who are you protecting? You or them?
Them.
Yeah.
Not me.
So why are we not more honest about it? Why don't we say, like, actually, do you know what, I'm having a really rubbish day? We should be far more open, because then if we're more open, maybe that will prompt more
Protect ourselves as well.
Yeah, we'll protect ourselves, but
Protect
equally
everyone else.
we're talking to people then, aren't we?
We're reaching out instead of hiding it in.
Reaching out is the key. In fact, you should call this podcast Reaching
Reaching
Out.
Out.
There you go.
Reaching out
Yeah.
after Gabrielle.
Yeah, there you go.
Tell me, what impact do you think COVID had on young people's mental health?
Oh, you see, I think it's really hard. I think I'm not going into COVID conspiracies because, you know, COVID clearly happened and it was really difficult for everyone. I think there are I've read an awful lot on it, and I think there's two camps of people. There's people who will say that people use COVID as an excuse for why we are where we are as a society. And then there's the other camp of people who will say that society is where we are because of COVID happening. And I just think that actually the reality is what's COVID had as an impact. I think it's made more people be even more attached to their phones, if that could even be possible, because we were isolated, weren't we?
Yeah.
You said about reaching out, but the only
Reaching
way
out.
to do that in COVID was via Snapchat.
Snapchat or FaceTime? Or...
Yeah. So I think that have we as a society become even more addicted to our phones? Yes, possibly. I also think that it's made us as a society less able to communicate with people.
Yeah.
Yeah. Quite happy to sit on a computer and email or do something, and people are less wanting to engage face to face.
Go out and meet up and things.
Yeah.
Instead of
So
just
I
sitting
think
in the
that's
phone.
where the impact, for me, I see that quite a lot.
Thanks, Mark, for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you.
Oh, Gabby, honestly, thank you for inviting me. I know I said it at the start, but I really appreciate just spending time with you and talking about mental health.
Thank you for being here. That about wraps up this podcast. I would like to thank all of my guests for their insight into the complex and interesting topic of mental health, and have given us valuable tips and personal stories on how people deal with it. Coming up next week on Gab with Gabby, we have more wonderful guests talking about our next topic, which is body image. Until next time, I've been Gabrielle, and you've been listening to my podcast, Gab with Gabby. See you all next time.